Well, good morning, everyone. Apologies for the late start. So welcome to the Regional Development Assessment Panel meeting of the 26th of September. My name's Tony Arias and I'm the presiding member. I'll introduce the panel members. Nima Primji, who's the deputy presiding member. Jason Hick, who's the specialist member there on Zoom. In relation to Part B, we have Mayor Clune and Councillor Colliver, both on Zoom. For Part C, Mayor Stocks and Deputy Mayor Paul Terry, also both be on Zoom. We have from the DAP Secretariat, Kristen Parker and Ashley Kelly, and we have a number of local government officers in attendance and applicants and submitters. With that, I will formally declare the meeting open at 9:37. I acknowledge we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Wadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters, and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with DAP Standing Orders 2024. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website, and members are able to refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in consideration of the information. Item 2 is apologies. We have Neil. Item 3, members on leave of absence. We have Neil. Item 4, noting of minutes, just for information that minutes of previous meetings are on the DAP website. So we move to Part B of the agenda, which is the City of Greater Geraldton. Item 1, declarations of due consideration. Members, I need you to declare that you have duly considered all the documentation that's been provided. If you're able to raise hands, or duly declared, thank you. Item 2, disclosures of interest. Members, are there any disclosures of interest?
No.
No, just in relation to local government members, just a reminder that the DAP standing orders require declarations if the item's gone to a council meeting.
Yeah, no.
All right, well, thank you for the clarification. So we move to item 3, which is Form 1 applications. And the first item, item 3.1, is lot 2965 North West Coastal Highway. And it's for a bulky goods, showrooms, fast food, motor vehicle repair and shop. We have one presenter on this item, Alexander Stagro from Apex Planning. Alexander, you've done these before. You have 3 minutes. You'd be aware that panel members have been provided with your presentation.
So I'm just the director of. Everyone can hear me? The freeze on the screen. Not my best angle.
No, mine. Where is it?
So if everyone can hear me. Hopefully there's no mic issues. Yeah, so Alejandro Stanio, Director of Apex Planning, applicant of the Service Commercial Development, proposed at 194 Northwest Coastal Highway and 207 Place Road in Weberton. This proposal seeks to redevelop the subject lots, which are zoned service commercial under the city's local planning scheme, with a service commercial development comprising showrooms, a fast food outlet, a vehicle service centre, and a small retail component. Operators are confirmed for each of these uses. The proposal represents a substantial and needed investment within regional WA and will establish national tenants, providing the residents of City of Greater Geraldton and interregional tourists with increased service commercial offerings on land zoned for that purpose. The application before you is recommended for approval by the City of Greater Geraldton, and it was supported by Main Roads through the DA referral process. We engaged and collaborated with both of these authorities during the pre-lodgement and post-lodgement phase of the process. The city has produced a comprehensive responsible authority report, which is underpinned by a clear and logical assessment of the development, demonstrating why it's worthy of approval. We've carefully reviewed the recommended conditions and through our presentation materials have requested that condition 13 be transferred to an advice note and that condition 14 be slightly reworded to ensure the local government is the clearance authority. Noting I have a short amount of time, I'll just briefly unpack these requests. Condition 13 requires the proponent to make arrangements to the satisfaction of Main Roads prior to any works being undertaken within the Northwest Coastal Highway Road Reserve. We've requested this condition be transferred to an advice note for two main reasons. The first reason is that condition 13, in the way that it's worded, is a little bit open-ended, noting it does not specify a particular requirement beyond making arrangements. The second reason is that condition 13 is also ambulatory, as it effectively requires Main Roads to be a clearance authority on the condition, who is a third party to this planning application. Given any works within the Northwest Coastal Highway Road Reserve require a separate approval from Main Roads in accordance with the Main Roads Act anyway, it's considered appropriate for condition 13 to be transferred to an advice note. Moving on to condition 14, this condition requires crossings to be provided adjacent to Northwest Coastal Highway, but also references Main Roads as the clearance authority. We don't have an issue with the base requirement of the condition, but to make sure that it's valid, we've requested that a minor textual change be undertaken to ensure this is done to the satisfaction of the local government on the advice of Main Roads WA. Panel members, that concludes my deputation. Thank you very much. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Members, questions? Okay. Thank you for your presentation. We'll now move to the City of Greater Geraldton local government officers. And I think we've got Dylan Ashworth. Sorry?
That's Albany.
Okay, all right. Would you like to make any comments about the application, or are you happy just to respond to questions?
Narrator Brown, Coordinator Statutory Planning here. Yeah, no, we're satisfied with the application as outlined in the report. It complies with the local planning scheme provisions. So no, we're satisfied and happy to take questions.
Okay, can I lead off then? What is the city's view in relation to the applicant's request to modify condition 13 and 14?
Look, the city has no objection to that. The only reason it was imposed as a condition was because that's what's occurred with recent similar DAP applications. It has been imposed as a condition. I can think of a recent one at the city in the last 3 months. So that is why we imposed it as a condition. But having said that, there's no objection to it being an advice note.
Okay, thank you. Members, other questions of the city?
You answered condition 13. How about 14? You're happy with the City of Geraldton and the advice of those being inserted into condition 14?
There shouldn't be an issue with that, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
Members, any other questions of the city?
None from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In which case, we are going to move to the item, and we've got a recommendation in the RAR to approve subject to conditions. Can I have a mover for that recommendation?
Yes, I'll Oh, sorry, yeah.
No, Mayor Clune, you've, so you're happy to move that recommendation?
Yes, I'm happy to move that. Thank you.
Okay, and seconder by Nima Prinji. Mayor Clune, did you want to talk to the motion?
Thank you. This development application is reasonably straightforward with coming through the city's viewpoint. It's going to be quite exciting what's going to happen. It's also going to mean the existing buildings and facilities there will, if this proceeds, will be removed, which is there's one there which is not really ideal in a residential area, so that will go out with this with the development of the bulky goods thing. And on the fronting the Northwest Coastal Highway, there's a couple of very old sheds which are quite well, they're reasonable sheds, but they don't not suited for type with today's standards. So it'll be a great thing as far as the city's concerned to see new development coming to town, and we just hope that there's no real long delay between development application and approval and then building approvals. We do acknowledge that Northwest Coastal Highway is a very busy highway at the moment, and with briefings we have received from Main Roads about they're well aware of traffic numbers and congestions along that section of road, and their plans, I don't know what their plans are, but any actions whichever they seem fit to do. So from a city point of view, we certainly welcome this application.
Thank you. Nima, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, presiding member. Overall support the RDAP recommendation. Although the land is not permitted, the development does meet the objectives of the commercial zone. It's well designed, and from the report, there has been a very good engagement with Main Roads, which is good to see in here. And you have addressed all their concerns. So I support the motion foreshadowing the changes to conditions 13 and 14.
Okay. Separately? Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Just for foreshadowing a potential change to condition 13 and 14. Is anyone opposed to the motion?
No.
Anyone else wanting to speak to the motion? No. I'll just very briefly. I'll be supporting the motion. Oh, sorry, Jason. I didn't see that little hand raised. So, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sorry, no, I didn't have a hand raised, but I'm more than happy to speak to the item. Having reviewed the RA and given consideration to that and the application as presented and the recommendation from the responsible authority, I'm comfortable with the recommendation that's been put to us and therefore support the motion, and likewise would be open and supportive to considering amendments to condition 13 and 14, which were foreshadowed. So on that basis, I'll be voting in support of the motion.
Thank you, Jason. Likewise, I'll be supporting the motion. I think from a planning framework, it's an appropriate group of uses, and in terms of the local context, I think within a service commercial zone, they are appropriate uses. And it would seem like the referral authorities are comfortable with how the proposal has been developed, so I will be supporting it as well. Mayor Clune, you foreshadowed a change?
Yes, just foreshadowed the change to condition 13 being transferred to an advice note, and for condition, and accordingly all the conditions to be renumbered, and condition 14 to insert the word the satisfaction of the City of Greater Geraldton on the advice of Main Roads WA.
Okay. Before I ask you to talk to that, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Colliver?
Second, thank you.
Thank you. Nima, did you want to make any comment on the motion?
No, I think that's fair enough. The reasonings are there.
Councillor Colliver, did you want to make any comment?
No, likewise, I think we've had a good discussion about that, and we're all okay with that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is anyone opposed to it?
No.
No.
If no one's opposed, so I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. So we revert back to the substantive motion. If there's no other proposed changes to conditions or advice notes, Mayor Clune, would you like to close debate?
I've no further comment, thank you.
Thank you. In which case, I'm going to put the motion. We've modified condition 13, 14, and we have a motion to approve subject to conditions. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Just finishing off part B of the agenda. Item 4, Form 2 applications, we have nil. Item 5, Section 31 reconsiderations, we have nil. With that, that finishes part B of the agenda. Representatives from City of Geraldton, you may stay and enjoy the rest of the meeting, or we won't be offended if you choose to depart. Thank you.
We'll take the latter.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you again.
All the Albany people. I'm just gonna wait for the Albany people.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome, City of Armidale representatives. Can I ask who's it? Sorry, try again. Albany. Can I ask who's in the room?
Yes, Tony, we have myself, Mayor of Albany, Greg Stocks, Deputy Mayor Paul Terry, Dylan Ashboth, and Jan van der Mesch, who are our planners.
Thank you. So we move to part C of the agenda, which is the City of Albany. So item 1, declarations of due consideration. Members, are you able to declare that you've duly considered the information part C of the agenda and the related information? Also noting there's been a R13 request for additional information that's been provided, was provided, I think, yesterday. Members, you're able to declare that by raising your hand. That's all duly declared. Item 2, disclosures of interest. We do have a disclosure from Deputy Mayor Terry, who was involved in the decision on 13th of December, where the matter was considered. And the Executive Director has made a decision that Councillor Terry can participate in the meeting and is not bound by that decision. Mayor Stocks, you haven't made a declaration. Is it necessary for you to make a similar declaration?
Yes, it is, Tony, and I had asked my PA to put that forward 2 days ago. I'll have to declare an interest exactly the same. I'll send some documentation through. So how do we do that now?
Okay, and if I could please ask you just confirm that you're able to deal with the matter and not bound by the council decision.
I'll confirm that.
Yep, thank you. So in accordance with standing orders, I'm happy for you to participate in the meeting and vote on the item. So our members, any other declarations? No? Okay, duly noted. So we move to item 3, which is Form 1 applications, and we have item 3.1, lots 1 and 2 Frenchton's Bay Road, and it's a short stay accommodation proposal. We have a number of presenters. In fact, well, we've got 2 presenters. And I've agreed to an extension for Daniel Panica and Trent Will to 5 minutes. The first presenter, Richard Vogwell.
Richard, are you able to hear?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see myself.
No, you'll just need to start your video.
Yeah, do I need to do that or can I just speak?
That's okay, you can just speak.
Yep.
Okay. Should I start now?
Yes, please, Richard.
Okay. For about 20 years, I've been involved in the community assessment of 6 development schemes on this iconic tourism property. As an experienced hydrogeologist, I'm particularly interested in these, as most rely on a groundwater supply from a small underlying aquifer. The proposed potable water supply comprises rainwater tanks and groundwater production bores. Connection to scheme water is not considered financially viable. The sustainability of the proposed water supply system could be compromised by decreasing rainfall and the unknown long-term groundwater yield quality from the poorly characterized aquifer underlying the property. Comprehensive hydrogeological studies of this aquifer are needed to properly quantify the hydraulic properties, extent, sustainable yield, and any hydraulic connection to the ocean. No such studies have been completed. 2 production bores are completed in the aquifer, but have never been properly tested by pumping and monitoring observation bores. They should be prior to the start of construction as part of future groundwater investigations. In the proposal documents, there are no details about a hydrogeological testing program, which needs completion prior to and not during the construction phase, which is, in my opinion, too late. They should be prior to the start of construction as part of future groundwater investigations. In the proposal, for example, what is the other source of water if during construction it is determined from this testing that inadequate groundwater supplies are available from the aquifer? That is why the hydrogeological testing work should be completed either before the development application is accepted or in the period between the approved DA and the start of construction to confirm that adequate suitable groundwater can be obtained from the aquifer in the long term. It seems dangerous to me to rely on a small, untested aquifer for a sustainable groundwater supply. To summarize, I'm very concerned that the city might approve the DA without requiring a pre-construction hydrogeological testing program to determine the capacity of the aquifer to meet the groundwater needs of the development proposed on lots 1 and 2. Completing such a testing program 1 year prior to construction start should be a condition of any project approval. Failure to complete such work could result in no suitable groundwater supply for the development and long-term water shortages and supply problems. Thank you for the opportunity to present my submission.
Thank you, Richard. Members, questions of Richard Bogwell? If there's no questions, Richard, thank you for your presentation.
Yep, you're welcome.
The next presenter is Robin Budden from the French's Bay Association. Robin, are you there?
I am just getting myself organised. All right. Better look at my camera. I guess I would just like to say, I guess in February, in our February 2024 submission to the city regarding the development application, we identified, I guess, what we saw as 2 red flags and a number of lesser concerns that we considered needed to be resolved before we could lend our support to the resort. Those 2 red flags were, I guess, as Richard had pointed out, around water supply and sewage disposal. Now, from what we see, and I'm speaking, I guess, on behalf of the committee of the French and Bay Association, the documents have provided in the agenda that these 2 issues have been resolved satisfactorily, in that, you know, the proponent has been issued his license to take groundwater by DEWA, and the hydraulic services plan basically has again satisfied DEWA that it is acceptable. We had a number of other lesser concerns around consultation with Noongar groups, the car parking, a bit around bushfire management, a bit around landscaping, and around the contribution to art. And as far as we can see, they've all been addressed by the proponent and the City of Albany. So with the concerns addressed, we feel that we're in a position to fully express our support for the proposed development of lots 1 and 2. And we look forward to seeing this high quality tourist accommodation up and running. Yes, we'd also like to acknowledge the proponent's willingness to engage constructively with our group. The approach has been a refreshing change, and we're looking forward to this continuing as the development moves ahead. So thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Members, questions? Perhaps, Robin, just a clarification from the association's perspective. You're saying that the association supports a current development?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. If there's no questions from the other panel members, Robin, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
The next presenter is Daniel Panica from West Environmental. As I mentioned earlier, I've agreed to a request for additional time for Daniel's presentation. So, Daniel, I've allowed 5 minutes. If you could please try and stay within that.
Thank you, panel members. I should be well within the 5-minute time. Thank you for your attention. I'm Daniel Panica, Senior Principal and Accredited Level 3 Bushfire Practitioner at Western Environmental, and speaking in support of the proposed development of holiday accommodation at Lots 1 and 2 French Bay Road. I prepared the Bushfire Management Plan and Bushfire Emergency Evacuation Plan for the development. Oops, I think I've lost my screen. That's okay. And my deputation today focuses on bushfire planning, specifically in relation to the issue about the assessment slope by the Department of Fire and Emergency Services. Firstly, though, I'd like to thank the City of Albany's planning team for their support in addressing the numerous concerns raised by DFAs, resulting in a single issue left to be resolved. I've sent through a written deputation. I won't go through that details. It verbatim, but I will try and summarise the main issues here and how we have addressed those. I think the first point that needs to be made quite clearly is that I understand the city's concerns on the comments provided by DFIS, but it is critical to note that the same assessment was approved by the city in 2018. In fact, our bushfire management plan includes the previously approved assessment for the original development. Regardless, we have provided additional detail on the methodology used for the slope assessment. Without bogging down in detail, effective slope is one of the key inputs required to determine a bushfire attack level and its impact on the rate of spread, intensity, severity, flame length, and the radiant heat flux of a fire. We must always endeavour to apply caution when undertaking bushfire assessments, but that also needs to be balanced with logic. And we need to consider actual fire behaviour in the context of the site. AS 3959, which is the standard used to determine bushfire attack level ratings, has a fundamental principle behind it, and that is that a fire develops to a quasi-steady rate of spread. That is, the fire has got to a point that it is fully developed and spreading under the assumptions under AS 3959. It's based on a certain size of fire, and the slope area in question that DFIS have raised does not meet those requirements for a fully developed fire. That being a short, narrow corridor, which I had on the screen and has now disappeared, but is in my written deputation, of vegetation on the foreshore down to the beach. This spans between 22 to 50 metres. We're just trying to get that back up on the screen now. That's okay. I'll speak to it. It is in my written deputation. Effectively, what we're talking about here is the slope most affecting fire behaviour, and that is noted in the Appendix B of AS 3959, which is the methodology used behind the BAL assessment. What that says is we need to consider the slope most affecting fire behaviour, or the slope which most significantly influences fire behaviour. We cannot consider a 45-degree slope down to the beach over 22 metres as being sufficient to support a fully developed rate of spread fire. The slope we do need to consider is the slope that's further to the west of the site that will support a landscape scale fire approaching the site, and we have considered that in our BAL assessment. We also, I guess the same approach was taken in 2018 with the previous approval, and it's not without precedent. The same assessment methodology, albeit in a different setting, was used by a different independent bushfire consultant on a different site that abutted foreshore vegetation as well. We've provided thorough justification for how the effective slopes were detailed, and that's not only from myself, it's from Kath Kinnear, who prepared the original bushfire management plan for the site that was approved in 2018. So on that basis, I disagree with the City of Albany's use of the terms incorrect and critical error. I understand they were taken from DFIS comments, but I disagree thoroughly with that, and I don't believe that the absence of revised comments from DFIS should delay assessment, particularly given their unwillingness to support the assessment methodology to date from 2018, or in fact similar methodologies which have been developed by accredited bushfire practitioners who have undertaken formal qualifications in bushfire modelling and assessment. In addition, DFIS are no longer required to endorse bushfire management plans for vulnerable land uses. There was an update in version 1.4 of the guidelines for planning bushfire prone areas that basically said verbatim, it should be noted that DFIS will provide advice but do not endorse BMPs or emergency evacuation plans, and SPP 3.7 will be amended to reflect this. In conclusion, the slope analysis has been undertaken by 2 accredited bushfire practitioners. DFIS comments are based on desktop assessment only, which lacks the contextual understanding of the site. And in my professional opinion, I believe the proposed development can be assessed in the absence of updated comments from DFIS, and request that approval be granted. Thank you very much.
Daniel. Members, questions of Mr. Paniker?
Yes, through you, Mr. Presiding Member, if I may.
Yes.
Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Paniker, and just start with sort of clarifying. While I understand the points that you're making in terms of the approach with the methodology, just as a separate consideration, have you considered alternatively looking at a short fire run method to assessment on the slope and have any appreciation of what that might tell you, despite looking at the predominant fire direction and behaviour?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Hick. It's a good question. We have considered a short fire run model for the site. It's a tricky one to apply. The short fire run model and WA doesn't have any guidelines on how to apply this, so we have to rely on New South Wales RFS guidelines. The site doesn't meet the methodology or the assumptions for the methodology to apply a short fire run in the way it's been written by the New South Wales RFS, and that's because of the greater connectivity to the landscape scale bushfire risk to the west. So we can't apply a short fire run per se by the way it's written. However, I undertook the modelling just to understand what the impact of radiant heat would be, given that this scenario isn't covered in the New South Wales RFS because it is quite unique. The radiant heat fluxes I came up with were actually substantially less than what we've proposed in our BNP. Our BNP is is definitely more conservative in the radiant heat flux setbacks that are required than a short fire run would apply. But I will preface that, add a disclaimer to that, in that short shouldn't be applied in this context, which is why the alternate slope methodology was adopted, which is the same as the Bindaring Parade precedent that I mentioned.
Thank you.
I think Mayor Stocks, did you have your hand up?
Deputy Mayor.
Yep, over to you.
Thank you, presiding member. Daniel, thank you for your presentation. It's good to hear about that method 2 calculation that you talked about. I do understand what you're saying in your presentation, and my question was going to be basically similar to Mr. Hick, in a alternative methodology, if you had done that. And I note that you said that the alternative methodology doesn't meet the standards, but you did that, and saying that especially for the refuge, that the kilowatts per metre squared would be less than 10. Is that my understanding of what you're saying?
Yes and no. So good point. So the short fire run methodology that Mr. Hick referred to, like I said, I did the calculations, but I didn't publish them because they don't fit the base assumptions for the methodology. However, the refuge has been assessed not using a short fire run. That's been used using full landscape scale fire with no reduction based on flame length, and the refuge meets the 10 kilowatt per square metre threshold without any reduction based on short fire run.
That methodology for the refuge site is for the plot above plot 3, I think, on the
yes. So the refuge assesses all of the vegetation plots around it, and we haven't reduced flame length as a result of short fire run for any of those calculations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that you referred to the LDP when they went through a similar assessment, and in 2018 the previous DA and now this one. Has been any significant differences on the ground in terms of the slopes or the vegetation, anything that puts into question how the fire ratings have been calculated?
That's a good question. Fundamentally, no. I visited the site in 2018 very briefly, and I had another look at it last year, 2023. If anything, there's less vegetation on the foreshore, probably as a result of erosion. I'm speculating though, but there have always been quite large kind of sandy or rocky sort of outcrops that are devoid of fuel. And there probably is a little bit less. I would say though, it's not substantially different to what was assessed in 2018.
Okay. My second question is with DFES. Have you engaged directly with DFES?
We have, yes.
Have you? Did you also put to DFES the short run calculation that you did? And did they come back? Did they agree or disagree? Nothing?
They don't support it. We had a conversation, and I can't remember the date. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. We met with their new Director of Land Use Planning, Des Abel, Jackson Parker, who's the Director of Technical Services, and there was another person there, and I can't remember her name. Effectively, the responses we got from DFES were what we've experienced over the past 6 to 8 years. They don't necessarily support anything that uses any alternate methodology than what is written into AS 3959, or they haven't seen enough evidence to support that in the assessment. So that was the same comments they provided in 2018 as well.
So just following on from that, the bushfire assessment guidelines 2018, 2024, are they different?
They are different. There's a new version of the guidelines that was released on Tuesday this week.
We're putting that aside.
The guidelines have changed in the way that we assess compliance in regards to siting and design of vehicular access and water supply, but the methodology behind a bushfire assessment and a bushfire attack level assessment has not changed.
Okay, and a follow-up question, is the issue that DFIS has, is it simply around the slope methodology, or is it more broadly in terms of how the guidelines have been interpreted? Yeah,
it's a good question, and Mr. Ashworth can probably provide more detail on this if needed, and if I miss anything. There were a number of DFIS concerns. I think fundamentally they don't support the development in its location. But the key issue that we're trying to address is the slope assessment methodology that they don't support, which we've seen on numerous projects.
Okay. This panel has dealt with a number of difficult sites, complex sites, and I think this falls into that category. Sites surrounded by vegetation, steep slope, single access. I will say that DFIS has taken a precautionary approach. Your view on that?
My view is I think we always must approach bushfire with caution. We have to be careful that we are not exposing life and property to undue bushfire risk, and that's a fundamental premise of not only the bushfire policy but how we go about it. What I said in my deputation, I fully agree with, though. We need to take that caution and we need to apply a lens of logic to it. I believe in this case the department have taken a conservative view without having the contextual understanding of the site and how it has been designed and how the slopes occur in the site and the greater landscape risk. And in my personal opinion, I believe that our measures are actually overly conservative, but we'd rather that than the alternative.
And Councillor Terry, did you have your hand up? Yep.
Mr. Chair. Daniel, I'm not an expert in bushfire management plan. This is very complex to get around. Can you give me some clarification, please, around State Planning Policy 3.76.6.1, where it indicates that, you know, given that there's an alternate recommendation that may come forward here, to accept the bushfire management plan, can you just give me some clarification about how, given that DFIS hadn't supported this, that particular section says that the fire management plan requires both local government and DFIS support?
It's a very good question as well. So I guess the key principle the key thing to consider here is SPP 3.7, and the clause you've referenced is from 2015, which did require DFIS to jointly endorse bushfire management plans. That was updated, and not in the policy, because the policy wasn't updated itself, but the guidelines for planning bushfire-prone areas were updated since 2015. So prior to Tuesday, we had the version 1.4 of the guidelines for planning bushfire-prone areas that came out in December 2021. Now that actually says in section 5.5.1 that it should be noted that DFIS will provide advice but do not endorse BMPs or emergency evacuation plans, and SPP 3.7 will be amended to reflect this. So that it was an acknowledgement 6 years after SPP 3.7 was come out that for whatever reason, I'm not going to speculate, they removed the need for DFIS to endorse vulnerable land uses. Does that help your concern?
Well, it does, and you know, further clarification is your rationale then, in the light of a potential alternate, that the objection of the city around the BMP, because DFIS haven't endorsed it, and mainly around the sloping, that's not relevant.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite catch the question in that.
So the question is, given that clarification, would you then draw the conclusion that the city's objection to defer, waiting for DFS is not relevant?
Correct. Yes, I would agree with that.
Clarification, and my apologies. Your plans that show the bell rating, can you confirm? Because it looked to me like I think southwestern part of the development are outside the Bell 29 rating, but can you confirm what the situation is with perhaps all the proposed
For the rest of the development?
Yeah.
So we had a concern raised by DFS originally that there was a shed that was located within garage located within Bell Flame Zone and Bell 40. We've moved that. So all aspects of the development, aside from the tents, are located within Bell 29 or below. So the tents are in Bell Flame Zone. However, they're considered a tolerable loss asset under the tourism provisions of SPP 3.7.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, so my interpretation was that the glamping tents are within that, but they're acceptable.
Yeah, just on that, a bit of clarification, the caretaker lodge, you mentioned the shed, and I wasn't quite sure to ask the question here or later, but if it were to go ahead, that shed would have to be modified, so it would have to go through another building permit? And
It's probably outside of my expertise.
But okay, going back to that question,
Yeah.
would that still meet the Bell requirements?
It will, because we've sited it further back from where it originally was. So it's in Bell 29 and below, which is permitted.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Members, any other questions for Mr. Panica?
Yeah. Mayor, just
Mayor Stocks?
no, Deputy Mayor Terry.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, just in relation to the bushfire emergency evacuation plan, and specifically in relation to catastrophic days, noting that the facility would be closed. So I have another question on top of this one. So how would that, in effect, how would that work, that it would be closed?
So that is a good question, and something that we've been dealing with not only in the city of Albany, but other local government areas, particularly with overnight accommodation. So that would be, and we've been advising the developer to develop a closure plan, effectively an operational plan that deals with preemptive closure. So the way that works is you get a 4-day fire danger rating forecast. So you know if there's going to be a catastrophic fire danger day 4 days in advance. Now that can change. It's happened extremely rarely. I can't cite the number because I can't remember it, but it happens less than once every 20 years where you get an unexpected catastrophic fire danger day. You'll know about that the day before. So that's the operational plan that would need to be prepared to effectively deal with where do people go, how do you get them there safely prior to the onset of that catastrophic fire danger day. So it's not something that we typically address in a development application because there's a lot of uncertainties. It would be an operational management plan prior to occupancy.
Yeah, okay. So supplementary question. I'm a member of the South Coast Volunteer Bushfire Brigade and have been called out to a fire that was deliberately lit across the road on Frenchman Bay Road, probably about 2 years ago. Noting that the area below the glamping tents is a public area, and with that slope, on a non-catastrophic day, an extreme day, fire conditions here would be a wind from the north, a hot wind.
Mm-hmm.
So and there are barbecues down there in that public area in the reserve or on the foreshore. So case midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, somehow a fire gets started deliberately at the bottom of that slope and then comes up, everyone's asleep in the glamping tents. There's a significant risk there for the operators, and that is one level of concern that I do have, and I think I did express that when we talked about the local development plan. So just bringing the other panel members' attention to that potential risk if we do approve this, that is a big risk. And I think the emergency evacuation plan should cater for that type of eventuality, and that any of the on-site managers would need to not be awake all night, but they need to be on alert all the time, especially when there's a northwesterly.
And that's a very fair point, Deputy Mayor. The bushfire emergency evacuation plan will form part of the operational plan, which can be updated. So, but I guess at a broad principle, we've considered that in our approach by prescribing the refuge on site. So that basically is, and it's not going to stop it may not stop the tents from burning down, but it allows people an option where you cannot evacuate safely. As you said, that fire that started south of Frensham Bay Road, that could potentially cut the road off. So we have the emergency refuge on site that has been sited in an appropriate area with a industry standard or an acceptable standard radiant heat flux to allow people a last resort refuge in case they can't get out in time.
Thank you.
One final question from me. You would have seen an alternative recommendation which lists a number of proposed changes to the bushfire management plan. Have you had an opportunity to consider
I have only
requirements?
So I haven't had a chance to review the alternate recommendation in any great detail. I think I got it in short notice. I did notice there, and correct me if I'm wrong, there were some conditions that effectively required DFAs to endorse the bushfire management plan. I would disagree with that because we're never going to get them to endorse or agree to this site. But aside from that, generally, and without having had the time to review them properly, although Mr. Will has, and he'll speak to that, I have no issues with updating a bushfire management plan as a condition of approval, and it's been applied as a condition on numerous developments throughout WA. It's just the endorsement of DFAs is going to be nigh impossible to achieve, so I would disagree with that.
And that's fine, and I will ask Mr. Will a similar question. Members, any other questions of Mr. Paniker? No? Daniel, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
And Will, you're...
You, Mr. Presiding Member.
Trent, I'll remind you, you've got 5 minutes and then questions.
Thank you very much. Trent Will from Taylor Burrell Barnett, the planning consultant for the project. And I'll just introduce as well Mr. John Cheeseborough from Hub Property, the project managers. I might actually just start by perhaps addressing or adding to a couple of the questions that were just raised, if you don't mind. Firstly, just in relation to the question on the shed and the caretaker's dwelling from Ms. Premji, I would say in response to the concerns that were raised by DFES, we had initially treated that as a non-habitable building. As the project developed a little bit further, my client sort of developed the idea of perhaps putting a mezzanine at the front portion of that building, sort of slightly separated from the shed, and using that for a caretaker to stay in. The project's probably not developed enough that a firm decision has been made on that. But we did relocate the building outside of the Bell 40 area. It's now in a Bell 29 area, so we believe that would be acceptable. However, the city has a condition in the draft, in the alternate recommendation, that a further approval be sought if that is the case, and we wouldn't have any objection to that. We feel that's reasonable. So just moving on with my presentation, I just wanted to start out with a little bit of background. Our client purchased the site in 2021. He used to visit the site when it was a caravan park, and he had a vision that he could transform it back into something that Western Australians could be proud of and interstate and overseas visitors could enjoy. We're really pleased with the development outcome which the team has come up with. It is subtle, it is modest, it fits in with its natural environment. It is supported by Tourism WA, and we feel it will make a significant contribution to tourism in Albany. And as you've just heard through the presentations, it is supported by the local community group, the Frenchman Bay Association, who we've been in constant communication with. The site is zoned special use, and under that zoning, it can only be used for tourist accommodation and associated uses. So there's no real question about this type of development being appropriate for the site. And I don't think the city's officers would disagree with anything I've just said, but obviously we have a recommendation for deferral. The deferral recommendation for 6 months, which is double the statutory timeframe for a DA, in our view, is not reasonable. And the deferral is, as Daniel commented on, so that DFS can comment on a slope assessment that they have already reviewed. Whilst we understand this is a technical matter and there are some complexities, we believe there is more than sufficient information and evidence for you to grant approval today. So you've heard from Daniel on the technical aspects. I won't run over those. I will just touch on some of the planning considerations. And the most pertinent planning issue here is the relevance of the previous approval. Pursuant to clause 67 of the deemed provisions, the history of the site is a relevant consideration, and that includes previous approvals. It's important to note there's been no change in the way that the slope has been assessed between the previous approval and the current application. And also, we're not talking about some ancient approval here that was assessed against an outdated set of guidelines. We're talking about an application that was actually still valid for 6 months at the point we lodged the DA, and it's only just expired 3 months ago. And again, there's been no change to bushfire policy that would affect the way that the slope assessment occurs. There has been other changes, but not in the way the slope assessment would occur. I was going to discuss the SAP case, but I think to make it less technical, I just wanted to share with you how we view the situation from a pragmatic perspective. So I think we could have applied to amend the existing approval and perhaps extend the time frame. In principle, amending 24 very large units, they were about 200 to 300 square metres each, to 24 smaller units would be reasonable for an amendment application. And if we had have done that, I don't feel we would have been subject to the rigours and process that have come with this bushfire review. Having said that, I feel lodging the new DA was the right thing to do. The design and the development is different enough that it warranted a new assessment. And our client did not want to go back to the previous approval because he felt there were some economic issues with how that would be implemented. We just don't think that should mean we pretend that previous approval never existed and review the bushfire differently. We don't feel we should be penalised so heavily for lodging a new development application. I do understand the city's not necessarily opposing the application. They're arguing the application should be deferred so DFS can review it further. We just feel right now there is more than sufficient information and justification available for the DAP to support this development. From our perspective, we have done everything possible to address the concerns raised. We've had the original author of the approved BMP detail exactly how the slope assessment was undertaken. We've also met with DFS officers to try to resolve the matter, albeit unsuccessfully. And I would also point out there's no statutory requirement to consult DFS further. They've already been consulted on the DA. They've previously been consulted on the LDP that was considered in 2023. They were also consulted on the 2018 DA. They haven't supported any of the previous proposals. So based on that, we feel we should not have to go through a further consultation process, and particularly not for a 6-month period. So just to summarise, we have a great development that will make a significant contribution to tourism in Albany. We've put a substantive effort into the DA. It's one of the most detailed applications I think I've ever submitted. The same bushfire methodology was approved previously. There's been no change to the planning to the framework that would change the way the slope is assessed. It's been supported by a level 3 practitioner, supported by a level 2 practitioner. And we respectfully ask that you approve the application today. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions of Mr. Will?
Deputy Mayor, Terry.
Councillor Terry?
Thank you, presiding member, and thank you, Trent, for your presentation. I just had one question, because there was in the RA talked about the condition 17, I think it is, or in the alternative recommendation, condition 17 talks about amalgamation of the two lots, and there was some discrepancies or inconsistencies mentioned in the RA. Just wondering where that's at from your end, and any comment that you want to make in relation to that specific condition.
Yeah, thank you, councillor, for the opportunity to comment on that condition. That we've only obviously just got the conditions on Tuesday or Wednesday, I think it was, and there's quite a few of them. So we haven't had a time to investigate them thoroughly, but condition 17 was the one that my client is most concerned about. He would like to keep the site in two lots as it is presently. We currently have a boundary realignment application in with the WAPC to just to realign those two lots. So all the tourism development is on one lot on the western side. And the only thing that would be on the eastern lot is the bushfire refuge. The refuge is obviously on that block because it has to be in that specific location. So it's in the safest part of the site from a bushfire perspective. We believe that the issues can be dealt with through easements. So there would be an easement for access across the property. There'd be an easement for people to access the refuge as well. I'd also point out that the local development plan, it requires amalgamation or the provision of easements. So we believe it's been contemplated before in terms of keeping the site in two lots. And my client is really just wanting to keep it in two lots for flexibility purposes, because there may be a future stage of this development that will come, and he would just like to keep the two lots separate for the time being.
Just on that issue, it is not uncommon where you have comprehensive development like this, if there are multiple lots for it to be amalgamated from a building perspective, access, and in this case too, we have issues to do with fire management. So it's not an uncommon request.
I'd agree with that, but I would also say it's most circumstances where we see it are where there's buildings physically across the boundary, and that's not the case here. All the buildings will still be separated from the boundary. It would just be the fact that the refuge would be on one lot and the remainder of the development would be on another lot.
And I guess that's my point, that it may be difficult to implement the development and the subsequent conditions if it's not on one title. But no, I understand your applicant's desire.
If that were open to perhaps an approach that we could contemplate and that might be acceptable, is if the condition is worded so that it's amalgamated or applied with suitable easements to the satisfaction of the City of Albany, perhaps even the same wording as the local development plan, and for consistency of the framework as well. We would really just like the option for that.
Okay, thank you. Members, Ms. Primjit?
Yes, I've got a few questions actually. Number one is, have you looked, you've made the mention that you haven't looked at these conditions that has as an alternate, and already you are signalling to us that you may not be quite happy with the conditions that are here. So it brings to question that potentially there could be conditions in there which you may not be agreeable on.
Look, certainly we haven't had a chance to forensically look at all the conditions. Our client's overseas at the moment, so we haven't had the chance to discuss it with him directly as well. But I did have a chat with him sort of late last night about the conditions. When we discussed it, he had read through it. I had read through it. Condition 17 was the main issue. I think the other conditions we could probably work with for the most part. I wouldn't necessarily rule out a Form 2 or anything like that, but the critical one for us was just that amalgamation condition 17.
My next question is, in your presentation, you mentioned it was not very, having the 6-month deferment was not palatable. Would deferment less than 6 months be palatable?
No, well, we think there's enough information to approve the application today. I would just say that if the DAP does consider deferral reasonable, the comment period for DFS is 42 days. That's assuming they consider it a new application. Unfortunately, the regulations don't deal with timeframes for individual matters to be resolved like this. So even if you allow the full 42 days, we might take a couple of weeks to prepare a response, and the city might take a couple or a few weeks to prepare a further assessment or an RAR. So I think absolute maximum it would need to be deferred for is 3 months. But again, I really think with Daniel's presentation and with the information that's submitted through the application and it's appended to the RAR, there is enough information to approve the application today.
Yeah, and my last question, probably should have asked you this, Daniel.
No, and I'm happy for Daniel to respond.
Yeah. On the agenda on page 552, just going to that, there is your comments, and then DFS's comments and WPEPL's comments. It seems from reading all of that, it seems to be different interpretations between the standards, or is it a misunderstanding?
No, yeah,
It's quite consistent,
yeah,
throughout the documentation.
It's a different interpretation. So I guess I'm only speaking on behalf of DFS because they're not here. So anything that I say, I'm happy to be rebutted. However, my understanding is DFS's interpretation of methodology behind AS 3959 is that it is inflexible and that there is a specific reference to how slope should be calculated in AS 3959. However, my professional opinion and the professional opinion of Kath Kinnear, who prepared the VEP, and the precedent from another bushfire consultant who did Bidari Parade, is that that's a misapplication of the standard, and it does allow flexibility and does allow for slope to be assessed in the logical way that a bushfire would spread towards the site. So it's a very tricky one to articulate in words. But yes, it's a different of interpretation that's been there since the state planning policy was introduced in 2015, I believe, or prior to that.
Members, further questions of Mr. Will or Mr. Paniker? Trent, I did have a question. You didn't make any reference to the LDP, which was only approved, I think, last year, correct? Daniel, stay there. Stay there. Sorry, stay there. You didn't make any reference to the LDP, and as I said, it was only approved last year, correct?
Yes.
And it is a question that I'll ask of the city's officers. So in the context of bushfire management, what consideration was given to in the LDP?
The LDP, there were 5 or 6 clauses on bushfire. We have addressed them all, and I think the RAR represents the city's comfort with each of those issues in the LDP. The BMP was not endorsed at the LDP stage because of those outstanding issues. Those have all now been addressed. The slope assessment is essentially a new issue that's been raised only through when this current development application was referred to DFS. I might have to check with the city, but I don't believe it had been objected to at any previous point.
And as I said, I'll put that question to the city's officers. So The LDP supported tourist development, and the zoning reflects that. So does the LDP anticipate a different form of tourist development, given there is a view that bushfire issue is a problem?
No, the LDP, it has some different layouts, which we have changed as the plans have been refined. But fundamentally, the LDP, it actually has the tents along that very front area. It specifically contemplates them. It contemplates development in roughly the same locations that we are proposing. We have gone a little further out to the west of the site than the LDP contemplated. We've provided justification for that. I think the city's accepting of that, and DWER was accepting of that because it's also close to the Vancouver Springs area. So fundamentally, I feel we're consistent with the LDP.
If I can add to that, if that's
Yes.
So we actually took the bushfire management plan that was prepared for the LDP and appended it to our bushfire management plan, and we actually didn't reclassify anything differently. We took data from that into our assessment, so it was exactly the same.
Okay. So if I understand it, there was a fire assessment 2018. There was some consideration as part of the LDP last year, and we've had further work now. My final question, you're obviously aware of the RAR recommendation to defer. To both of you, what is going to be achieved by deferring for 6 months, in your view?
Look, in my view, nothing. I've not seen DFAS support this type of assessment, which has been applied on numerous sites ever. So I don't expect them to change their tune, given that they have not supported this since 2018, let's call it. I don't believe that anything will be gained by the deferral other than another objection, and then we'll go through this process again.
I fully agree. It would appear to us that DFAS will remain steadfast in their comments. Look, to be fair, it may give the city an opportunity to process it further, understand it further, and perhaps change their mind, or I should say change their mind, come to a more firm conclusion on the matter. But we think enough time has been allowed for that through, we lodged the DA in December 2023. And we, as I said, we think there's enough information and justification here for you to support this today.
Thank you.
Just on the back of that question, do you think a deferral will give you the opportunity to look at the conditions that has been stated in the R13 direction more, and then look at if there is some changes or some other proposals?
I think it would give us a lot more comfort if there was an approval. If the only condition, just to reiterate my comments before, that we have a major concern about was the amalgamation. The remainder, I feel it would be easier for us to lodge a Form 2 application or something similar to that. I'm not suggesting we will do that, but I feel that would be a smoother process to review conditions rather than deferral. And I know there's changes to panels and the like that are coming up, and we would really more prefer the certainty of the approval.
And if I could add to that, in the time that I was sitting down, I have reviewed, and I misspoke, the conditions, the alternate recommendation conditions put forward. I've got no issues with conditions 1 to 4 related to bushfire. There was prefacing that a recommendation that the slope calculation be updated to the satisfaction of DFAS, and that's the part that I've checked too, but the conditions themselves are acceptable from a bushfire point of view.
These are the 4 conditions on page 2 of the alternate recommendation, specifically relating to the BMP, not the DA per se.
Okay, thank you. Members, any final questions to the presenters?
Sorry, Mr. Presiding Member, if I can through you, it may just be a point of clarification, if I may, and just a question to Mr. Panica, just in relation to the bushfire bushfire management plan and comparison to the historic or previous bushfire management plan that supported the LDP. Having and just given the commentary in relation to the consistency and the adoption of the previous data, and I mean, while your views on the slope analysis and how that should be undertaken, given the prevailing or the context and the landscape context and likely approaching fire front is clear. But having reviewed the biodiverse solutions BMP, I wasn't clear from that had been a specific consideration that had been applied to the slope classes. But I'm also appreciating I may be wrong. I may have missed it. I just was wanting your view or clarification on the biodiverse solutions considerations of the slope, and that they are in fact consistent with the view and the approach that you've taken.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mr. Hick. You're correct. The existing bushfire management plan wasn't silent on the slope assessment. It did talk about how it was done, but it was in very brief detail. So we picked up on that as a concern, and that was the letter that Biodiverse Solutions prepared recently that went to DFAS to review, that justified how the slope assessment was undertaken. And I support that approach. It's consistent with my view of how fire will behave in the landscape and how slope should be assessed.
Thank you.
Panel members, no final questions. Mr. Will, thank you. Mr. Paniker, thank you. We do have one final submission from Paul King, and it's a written submission. So there's no questions, but I'd just like to point out that we have got that, and that's been circulated to members. We now move to the city's offices and Dylan Ashboth. My apologies, Dylan. I did have you also working for the City of Geraldton. Very busy person. Would you like to make any overall comments about the application?
Yeah, just briefly, presiding member. I think most of the matters have been addressed in detail already with the other submissions on the matter. I'll probably just clarify a few things, although I will start off by saying it is a site, and we have been working or leading up to this development application for a number of years. We're confident we've got all the issues addressed. The slope calculation to the north of the site does remain the only outstanding issue from our perspective. And I would just like to clarify that our recommendation to defer was provided in order to enable DFAS to comment on the justification provided by the applicants for the methodology used, rather than necessarily seek their endorsement of the BMP. The conflicts between the SPP and the guidelines are noted, and I believe that the provision relating to DFAS endorsement of the BMP has now been removed in the latest iteration of the SPP that was released a couple of days ago. I think the referral will allow us to explore whether the impacts of the fire, noting it's less than 1 hectare, and the applicant's justification that the bushfire wouldn't necessarily reach its full intensity in an area that narrow. That's the key matter that we'd like to explore with DFAS. It's about the fire behaviour and the intensity of the fire and the radiant heat impacts on the sightings of the buildings. So that was the main reason to recommend deferral. I'd also like to note that the recommendation for deferral was for a maximum of 6 months, and that was with potentially the view that plans may need to be updated following DFAS comment on the methodology. So we wouldn't object to that time frame being reduced to 3 months, or a time deemed appropriate to allow DFAS referral and us to update the RAR.
Thanks, Dylan. Can I lead off with questions then? First one, you've obviously heard the detailed presentation from Mr. Panica about his view on the methodology for that slope analysis and conclusions in terms of bell rating. Has that influenced your decision or a position in terms of a recommendation?
So we did receive that that justification. I think there was only two weeks left to provide the RAR. It was considered. We did have a meeting with DFIS to discuss it. Unfortunately, they hadn't had a chance to review. So I have considered Daniel's justification and the justification provided by Biodiverse Solutions. But I would just like to, we're just hoping to seek clarity from DFIS on the technical aspects and the assumptions under AS 3959. And that would really relate to the intensity of the fire and the radiant heat impacts, which I think, given it is a technical bushfire matter, we really would like some expert advice on that before making a final decision.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions? Ms. Premji?
Yes, to Dylan. In the R13, the alternate that has been put forward at the moment, the applicant has mentioned that they would like to see condition 17, the amalgamation of the lots, be amended, so they are not amended. What is the city's position on that?
We think amalgamation would be the best outcome, and there are a number of reasons for that. That would enable the on-site shelter to be located on the same as the development. And we're also thinking of any future development on the new lot, if we call it Lot 2, for instance. It would be a smaller lot. It would be severely constrained by bushfire, coastal processes, the need to provide parking, land application area for effluent disposal, water tanks. So with that in mind, and considering the local planning scheme only allows a tourist development or a caravan park to be considered on that lot, we feel if it wasn't amalgamated, there wouldn't be sufficient space on that lot to accommodate the desired developments. And also in relation to the bushfire shelter, that is located on the only suitable position on site that's subject to a radiant heat rating of about 10 or below. So if the lot were to not be amalgamated, and that was a separate lot, under the current guidelines, it would be unable to comply with the vehicle access provisions, and it would require an on-site shelter, but there wouldn't be any position on site for that shelter to be provided.
Thank you. And my last question to the city, you did say that you are confident of all the issues, so you're happy with the foreshore plan, you're going to put the beach access and etc. You are comfortable with all of those concerns that were expressed prior?
We're comfortable that the conditions we provided will sufficiently address those matters.
Thank you.
Dylan, I asked the presenters about the LDP and the previous approval in terms of the bushfire issue and sort of the guidelines. So I'd like you to respond if you could. So in terms of what has changed, so we had 2018 approval, DAP approval. The LDP was changed and approved in 2023. We've got the current application. In your view, what has changed to require clarification of that methodology in terms of the slope analysis?
The BMP wasn't approved as part of the local development plan. The proponents at the time wanted that application to be decided by council, and we didn't have the updates required, but we felt it would be sufficient to include provisions in the LDP which would address the outstanding bushfire matters. I do note that the slope calculation wasn't brought up in the LDP or under the initial approval in 2018. But we received comment during the public comment period raising concerns with the slope calculation and also DFIS response on the matter where they raised concerns. That brought the matter to our attention, and we feel that it does need to be addressed. Either way, I don't think previous approval is probably enough to ignore it moving forward.
Okay. It's obviously the issue of the methodology and the Australian standard is a very technical, complex issue. And can I suggest it's open to interpretation? Do you think a deferral is going to get us clarity in terms of whether it complies or not?
I think it will allow us to explore the matter. If DFIS don't support the methodology, then I'd like to understand why. I'd like to get that out of them, and then that will probably inform the city's position on the matter. If we can understand why they don't support it, if they believe the radiant heat impacts on the buildings are going to be unchanged, or if they will be reduced because of the narrow fire run and the smaller area. It's something that we need to, or I'd like to be aware of before making an informed decision.
Okay, just following on from that, obviously the alternative recommendation that was provided set out a number of points that needed to, well, effectively required the BMP to be modified and updated. Wouldn't that achieve the same aspect in terms of what you're suggesting a referral would do?
I'm concerned that if the methodology was considered by the city and DFIS following referral to be inappropriate, that a significant portion of the site would be in either a BAL 40 or BAL FZ area, and then that would result in non-compliance with the siting and design provisions of the guidelines. So that may necessitate some changes of the plans or the relocation of some of the buildings.
Okay. Members, any final questions of the city's officers? No? Okay, well, thank you, Dylan. So we now move to the RAR recommendation, and we have a recommendation to defer the application. I'm just calling up the detail. Members, is someone prepared to move the RAR recommendation to defer? Ms. Fringe? Is there a seconder? No seconder. It's going to lapse. Is someone prepared to move an alternative recommendation? Councillor Terry? Sorry, Councillor Terry. So you're moving the alternative recommendation, is that correct?
Yep, I'm prepared to move the alternative recommendation, but just ask for a little bit of assistance from yourself in relation to the conditions and how those extra 4 conditions that are noted in the local government statement, where they would fit in that list of conditions, because those 4 aren't in that list of conditions.
Yeah. Councillor Terry, I will say that the format of the alternative recommendation does need modification, but I'm happy to deal with that separately. And if we can get a seconder for that alternative recommendation, and then we can deal with the actual technical part and conditions, if you're happy with that. Yep. So is there a seconder for the alternative recommendation? Mr. Hick? Councillor Terry, did you want to talk to that alternative motion?
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. I'd like to thank the presenters that we've heard from today and the reports, and also our officers and the amount of work that's been done in relation to this development assessment. A lot of work has gone into it, and we have talked a lot about the bushfire management plan and the calculations. I think if we were to defer it, I don't think we would get any extra valuable information. I think we know what DFIS are likely to say, and whilst I expressed some concerns in relation to the beat and a fire at midnight and how that would be addressed or attended to. I think the methodology that the consultant Daniel has used, I understand his argument and prepared to accept that. And overall, I think it's a great development to have here in Albany. It's that quality accommodation is badly needed, and especially out at the Frenchman Bay area. And that site has been, badly underutilised since the caravan park was demolished or disused back in the 2005 or whenever it was. And it was really good also to hear from the Frenchman Bay Association, Robin Budden. I'm not sure if he's still online. To hear that they're satisfied with the development as it exists, and also the conditions that have been on this alternative recommendation. So I commend everyone for the work being done and look forward to it happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Terry. Mr. Hick, did you want to talk to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. As a second to the motion, having reviewed the responsible authority report and also heard the various presentations and responses to questions raised today, I'm of the view that the application that's put in front of us, the use is clearly acceptable use under the planning framework. The development that is proposed is acceptable and appropriate to its context and also the planning framework that's established for the site. And mindful that there have been a number of broader issues or considerations resolved in terms of the acceptability of the use for the site, and inclusive of water supply and provision, and am mindful that really it would seem the key consideration that has taken, I suppose, the majority of our consideration and discussion today has really been in bushfire and the bushfire responses. I think further to that, there has been resolution of almost the full range and extent of bushfire requirements, except for what would be the only outstanding matter, which is the consideration of the radiant heat exposure of development in light of the Bell assessment and slopes on the northern portion of the site. That being said, having reviewed the information, the responses from both DFES from the city, but also from the applicant's bushfire consultant, I can not only understand and appreciate, but support the views that have been put in terms of how that slope class consideration should be applied. Also appreciate that in light of a short fire run, or a short run fire that would approach from the north isn't going to be meeting the standard AS 3959 considerations on, and that landscape scale fire would approach from not from the northern direction. And so on that basis, I'm comfortable with the application of the slope class as has been presented, noting that is also consistent with determination classification that has been undertaken for both for finalisation of the LDP and previous development approval. But I think also importantly in this case, I do think it is important to note that we are relying on the application of not only a technical framework, and while there's been discussion around the difficulties of the technical nature of this, I do think we need to be mindful this is being applied by practitioners who have not only gone through an accreditation process. It's an accreditation process that's established specifically to support the processes and considerations we are considering today. And so on that basis, I do think the views of that have been put forward to support the bushfire management plan, slope classifications, the acceptability of that by not only the current consultant but previous consultants. We do need to be mindful that they are doing that under an accreditation framework that does need some regard. And while I can note and appreciate there are outstanding comments from DFES, I too maybe share the view that they're not necessarily going to be reconcilable views and maybe justifiably from a DFES view somewhat more conservative, but having had regard for the circumstances, the context, the level of risk and the opinion provided, I'm comfortable that has been acceptably resolved. The siting therefore is appropriate given the radiant heat exposure, and that being really the only key consideration that would potentially cause a decision. Other than supporting this, I'm comfortable to support the motion and would be voting accordingly. And do note that we would need to also consider some clarification or modification to the condition set, particularly just the inclusion of the first four bushfire conditions into the condition set.
Thank you, Mr. Hick. Members, is there anyone opposed to the motion? And it's a motion to approve subject to conditions. Anyone else wanting to speak to the motion? No?
So
I will be, sorry?
Member, well, the motion or conditions? Are we going to talk about conditions? Putting to the vote?
Yeah, Mayor Stocks, we can talk about conditions if you want. Are you proposing modifications to conditions?
Just some endorsement of condition 17. I just wanted to talk to that.
Okay. Well, we don't have a motion to change that at the present time. So are you prepared? You're supporting the current motion and reinforcing condition 17 should stay?
Only to say that I think the explanation for the rationale for condition 17 to exist by Dylan was very clear, and we did have a conflicting message coming from the proponents' representatives to say that they wouldn't be happy with that, and they may lodge a Form 2, but I'm saying that I think that explanation was more than clear as to why.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Stocks. I will be supporting the alternative recommendation. Having said that, I will foreshadow that there needs to be a change to the preamble. It is.
Type something up if you're happy with that, so that it's consistent. So let's accept.
I agree. A similar one. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. In order for it to be a valid motion for DAP to consider, it does need some change. So I think we're going to share a screen in a moment. Just while that's being done, I probably should outline why I'm supporting the alternative motion. As Mr. Hick has indicated, I think from a planning perspective, it would seem that the proposed use is appropriate. It's consistent with the LDP. The issue we're discussing principally is about fire management, and the history of and it is recent history in terms of bushfire consideration for the site, would lead me to think that the issues being comprehensively addressed. I've considered the fact that 2 independent reviews, level 3 certification and level 2 and level 3, were both experts in the field, conclude that the assessment and methodology is appropriate. So based on that, even though it is a complex site and warrants some careful consideration, I think that's going to be done. And I will be supporting the additions to the, as per the alternative recommendation to the bushfire management plan. And I'll foreshadow that. But if we can perhaps have a look at the last page.
Can't see the whole screen. It's very difficult to read what's there.
No, it's further down, actually. Further down. Yep. Get up, next page up. Okay.
Sorry.
Can you get rid of the other? You just can't read.
Sorry.
Okay. Now that may be difficult for members to read, but what I have done is drafted that to be a much more consistent DAP motion that outlines that the use is appropriate in the context of the local scheme. And it also then makes references to the various plans that the city has considered and references the deemed provisions. So that's what would be considered a standard DAP resolution. So I will move that is inserted in lieu of the preamble that's in the alternative. If there is someone who's prepared to second that. Ms. Premji. As I said, the reason for that is that the alternative recommendation includes statements and endorsement of bushfire management plan, which is not the role of the DAP. And the alternative recommendation is more in line with what the DAP should be considering in reaching a decision. I should also foreshadow that I'm going to propose changes to conditions as per the alternative motion to require changes to the bushfire management plan, but I'll deal with that separately. Ms. Premji? Yeah, no, yeah. Do you want to make any comment?
No, I agree. I would like to say that the plans should go ahead as it is within, the application should be approved and supported by DAP as it is within the planning framework. However, the alternative with regarding to bush management plan, I think needs to be readdressed to make sure that, and to ensure, and we take into account the city's concerns, that they need to understand this technical background with regard to the slope calculations, and it needs to be sorted out with DFES, and it needs to be in consultation with DFES to the satisfaction of the City of Albany. So being a third party, it is important that that be clarified, and I hope that the applicant and the city will work to clarify that position so we do not have a potential problem in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Premji. Is anyone opposed to that motion, and does everyone understand it? So there's a hand up there. Councillor Terry?
Clarification. So on the list of the bushfire conditions, I think at number 3, it talked to the Shire. Just propose that to change that to the city.
Councillor Terry, I am actually proposing a new condition that will include those requirements, and I think we won't discuss it now, but you can see what's proposed. So I'm picking up the points that have been suggested by the council officers, and will require the bushfire management plan to address those points. Does that clarify?
So condition number 3 there, certification shall be provided to the Shire. Should that not be certification shall be provided to the city? No, it's a bit pedantic, but number 3.
Yeah, there is a further condition.
I have no idea what's going on with the settings. I can't get it.
You can't share it.
Makes it difficult.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I might need to just do it manually then. So
That's great. It is being
what I'm
shared.
proposing is a new.
Yeah, can you say that? No.
No, we can't see the whole thing. It's very difficult to approve something you can't see.
I don't know
So,
what's going on here.
Councillor Terry, are you happy to deal with this matter separately? Because we've got a motion that seeks to change the preamble, which I don't think should be problematic if you're happy to support the alternative motion, and then we can deal with conditions separately.
Yeah, I'm prepared to approve that alternative that you've said, but my point is at point 3, it refers to the Shire. I'm just saying it should say to the city. Point 3 of the bushfire conditions, not 1.3, point 3, the last one.
Oh, okay. My apologies. My apologies. Okay, so I don't think anyone was opposed to those changes that have been proposed. So I'm going to put that all those in favour. That's unanimous. Now, I also propose new conditions and 3 new conditions. Hopefully Ashley can get those so you can see what's proposed.
I'm not IT savvy. I don't.
So what's on the screen? The additional 3 conditions?
This is what they can see, which is.
Yes. So we can't see that, but the city can?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good. I've got it here. That's okay. So I will be moving 3 new conditions. So conditions 1, 2, and 3. The first condition requires the bushfire management plan to be updated to reflect further discussion on the methodology, the reference to the 72 square metres in terms of the shelter, recognition of the capacity, 70 people, specifications on firefighting, which is already addressed, but just further clarification. Clarification also relating to verge clearance, which is obviously outside the site, and the on-site shelter being designed in accordance with National Construction Code. Then condition 2 requires the revised and accepted bushfire management plan and bushfire emergency evacuation plan being implemented and ongoing. And probably should have words to the satisfaction of the city. And 3, certification that from an accredited bushfire consultant that all the bushfire management actions have been implemented. So members, are you clear on what's proposed? Yep. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I've moved that and I do need a seconder, Ms. Premji. I think it's the purpose of that is simply to address those items that the city believes perhaps needs some further clarification or additional information in terms of the BMP. Ms. Premji, did you want to make?
I think these bushfire conditions as put forward will give both the city the opportunity to get the amended bushfire management plans and the evacuation plans and to go through their own due process, as the city needs to do so, to ensure that they are satisfied with what is being implanted from management of any potential fires, regardless of which direction they come from. So I think this will hopefully provide the city with the comfort that they still have got the opportunity to address their concerns and the applicants to make sure that they work with the city to address those concerns.
Thank you. Is anyone opposed to the motion that includes those 3 conditions? Anyone else wanting to speak to the motion? If not, I'm going to put that. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Members, any other potential changes to conditions or advice notes? No, in which case, councillor Terry, you move the substantive motion. If you would like to make any closing remarks.
I think other than just to say, I think those extra conditions that you've proposed, presiding member, are quite good. And being mindful of the concerns that the city officers have, and as you said, provide the opportunity to move this forward and clarify a couple of things. So I think it's a good outcome, and support it. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion to approve subject to conditions, and there's been a few changes to conditions and the actual motion. I'm going to put that. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Just finishing off the agenda, item 4, Form 2 applications. We have Neil. Item 5, Section 31 reconsiderations. We have Neil. Part D, other business. Item 1 is SAT application and Supreme Court appeals. They're listed. Item 2, general business. Members, any general business? No. In which case, thank you for your participation. And I declare the meeting closed at 11:32. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.